I never planned to attend that horse auction. 3 months after Dad's funeral, I was still sorting through his belongings when I found a crumpled business card tucked inside his old military jacket. Henderson Horse Auctions was printed in faded letters with a date circled in red ink, today's date. My hands trembled as I held the card. Dad had been gone for months, yet somehow this felt like a message from beyond. Against my better judgment, I drove the 2 hours to the rural auction house, a weathered barn surrounded by pickup trucks and horse trailers. The auctioneer's voice boomed across the crowded space as I squeezed through the crowd. Families bid on gentle mares, while ranchers eyed working horses. I felt completely out of place until lot number 47 was announced. Next up, we have Thunder, a 7-year-old stallion with military training background. My heart stopped. A magnificent black horse entered the ring, his coat gleaming like polished obsidian, but it wasn't his beauty that made me gasp. It was the distinctive white star on his forehead, exactly like the one Dad had described in his old war stories. The horse's eyes scanned the crowd until they found mine. In that moment, something electric passed between us. Recognition. This wasn't just any horse. This was the Thunder from Dad's stories, the one he'd trained in secret during his final years of service. The bidding started at $500. I raised my hand without thinking, my heart pounding as I realized I was about to uncover a piece of my father's hidden past. As the bidding escalated, memories of Dad's stories flooded my mind. He'd always been vague about his final military assignment, saying only that he'd worked with special animals before his retirement. I'd assumed he meant guard dogs, never imagining he'd been training horses. $1,000, the auctioneer called. Several serious bidders remained active, including a stern-looking man in military fatigues who seemed particularly determined to win Thunder. I thought about Dad's last words to me in the hospital. Son, there are things I never told you, important things. When the time comes, you'll understand. At the time, I dismissed it as medication-induced rambling, but now those words felt prophetic. Thunder's behavior in the ring was remarkable. While other horses had seemed nervous or agitated, he stood with military precision, responding to subtle hand signals from the handler. His training was evident in every movement. This was no ordinary ranch horse. 1,500, I called out, my voice cracking slightly. The military man turned to look at me, his eyes narrowing as he assessed this unexpected competition. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. "Where are you? Mum's been calling." I ignored it. Whatever family drama awaited at home paled in comparison to this moment of discovery. The auctioneer's gavel hovered in the air. Going once at 1,500. Thunder's eyes found mine again, and I swear I saw something like hope in their depths. This horse represented more than just an animal. He was a living connection to the father I was still learning about, even after his death. 2,000! The military man's voice cut through the barn like a blade. His posture suggested this wasn't just about acquiring a horse, it was personal. I felt my savings account balance flash before my eyes. 2,000 was already more than I'd planned to spend, but something deep inside urged me to continue. Dad had left me a small inheritance, money I'd been saving for a house down payment. Was I really about to blow it on a horse I couldn't even stable? 2,500, I shouted, my voice stronger now. The crowd began to take notice of our duel. Whispers rippled through the audience as they watched two determined bidders face off over a single horse. Thunder remained calm in the center ring, but I noticed his ears were turned toward me, as if he was following our conversation. The military man stepped closer, and I could see his name tape, Colonel Morrison. He looked like he'd seen combat with weathered hands and eyes that had witnessed things most people never would. "Son," he said quietly during a brief pause in bidding, "you don't know what you're getting into. That horse has a history." "So did my father," I replied, meeting his gaze. and I think they knew each other. Something shifted in Morrison's expression. Recognition? Surprise? Before he could respond, the auctioneer called for the next bid. 3,000, Morrison announced, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. I thought about Dad's workshop, filled with leatherworking tools and horse equipment I'd never understood. Suddenly, those mysterious items made perfect sense. He hadn't just trained Thunder, he'd crafted custom tack for him. 3,500, I said firmly, knowing it was likely my final bid. Colonel Morrison studied my face for a long moment before doing something that shocked everyone in the barn. He lowered his hand and stepped back from the bidding. Sold to the young man in the blue jacket for $3,500. The gavel fell with finality, and suddenly I owned a horse I knew nothing about caring for. As the crowd dispersed and Thunder was led away for paperwork processing, Morrison approached me. "Your father was James Mitchell, wasn't he?" he asked quietly. My knees nearly buckled. "How did you know? You have his eyes and his stubborn streak." Morrison's stern expression softened into something resembling a smile. "Jim trained Thunder for a classified program I oversaw. When your father got sick, he made me promise to watch over the horse." The pieces began falling into place. Dad's mysterious doctor appointments that lasted all day. His insistence on driving to the VA hospital in a town that didn't have one. He'd been visiting Thunder, continuing his training even while battling cancer. "Why didn't you just buy him yourself?" I asked. Morrison looked toward the stall where Thunder waited. "Because Jim's last request was specific. He said if anything happened to him, Thunder should go to someone who would love him, not just use him. He described you perfectly, down to that stubborn expression you're wearing right now." Tears stung my eyes. Even in death, Dad had been orchestrating events, ensuring Thunder would find his way to me. "I don't know the first thing about horses," I admitted. Morrison clapped my shoulder. "Lucky for you, I do. And I owe your father more than I can ever repay. How about we get this horse home, and I'll teach you everything Jim taught me." Loading Thunder into the borrowed trailer was easier than expected. He walked up the ramp with military precision, as if he'd done this countless times before. Morrison had arranged for temporary boarding at his ranch, while I figured out permanent arrangements. During the drive, Morrison shared stories about Dad that painted a picture of a man I'd never fully known. Jim had a gift, with horses that bordered on supernatural. He could calm the most aggressive stallion with just his voice and presence. "He never mentioned any of this at home," I said, still processing everything. Military contracts required strict confidentiality. Plus, Jim was protecting you and your family. Some of the work we did, let's just say it attracted attention from people you wouldn't want knowing where you lived. We arrived at Morrison's ranch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Thunder's ears perked up as we unloaded him, and he immediately began exploring his new surroundings with intelligent curiosity. "He's looking for something," Morrison observed, "or someone." As if on cue, Thunder walked directly to a specific stall and stood waiting. Morrison's face went pale. That was Jim's favorite stall. Thunder hasn't been here in over a year, but he remembers. I approached Thunder slowly, my heart pounding. When I reached out to touch his neck, he turned and pressed his forehead against my chest, the same gesture Dad used to do when he wanted to comfort me as a child. "He knows," Morrison whispered. "Somehow, he knows you're Jim's son." That night, I slept in the barn, unable to leave Thunder alone. As I dozed in a chair outside his stall, I could swear I heard Dad's voice on the wind, finally at peace, knowing his beloved horse was safe. The next morning, Morrison led me to a locked tack room I hadn't noticed before. Inside, covered by a dusty tarp, sat a collection of custom-made saddles, bridles, and equipment that took my breath away. "Your father made all of this," Morrison explained, running his hand along the intricate leather work. Each piece was designed specifically for Thunder's training program. I picked up a bridle adorned with small silver medallions. Upon closer inspection, I realized they weren't decorative. They were military commendations. Dad's actual service medals worked into the leather design. What exactly was this program? I asked, though part of me wasn't sure I wanted to know. Morrison hesitated before answering. Search and rescue in hostile territory. Thunder was trained to carry wounded soldiers to safety in areas too dangerous for vehicles or helicopters. Your father developed techniques that saved dozens of lives. A leather journal caught my eye, tucked between two saddles. I opened it to find Dad's handwriting, detailed notes about Thunder's training progress, behavioral observations, and something that made my heart skip. Entries about me. Day 847. Thunder responded well to voice commands today. Reminds me of teaching my son to ride his bicycle. Patience and trust are everything. Day 923. Thunder's loyalty is absolute now. I pray my son will understand someday that everything I did was to protect the people I love. Tears blurred my vision as I read page after page of Dad's thoughts, his hopes that I would someday meet Thunder and understand the sacrifices he'd made. Morrison watched me quietly before speaking. There's more, son. Your father didn't just train Thunder, he saved him. That horse was scheduled for euthanization after a training accident. Jim fought the system for months to prove Thunder could recover. Over the following weeks, Morrison began teaching me the basics of horsemanship, starting with the fundamental principle Dad had lived by: respect and partnership, never dominance. Thunder isn't just a horse, Morrison explained, as I learned to properly saddle him. He's a soldier who's seen combat. He's lost friends, faced danger, and carried wounded men to safety. You need to earn his trust the same way you would with any veteran. The learning curve was steep. My city-soft hands developed blisters from handling reins and lead ropes. My legs ached from hours in the saddle, but Thunder was patient with my mistakes, almost as if he understood I was Jim's son and deserved the same gentle guidance Dad had always provided. During our third week together, something remarkable happened. While practicing basic commands in the training ring, Thunder suddenly stopped and looked toward the ranch entrance. A moment later, Morrison's truck appeared, carrying a wounded wild horse that had been caught in a fence. Without any command from me, Thunder walked directly to the injured animal and began the same calming behavior Morrison had described from Dad's stories. He positioned himself protectively, using his body language to communicate safety and comfort. I've never seen anything like it, Morrison breathed. Your father taught him to recognize trauma and respond with compassion. Thunder's not just trained for rescue, he's trained for healing. As we worked together to help the wounded horse, I finally understood what Dad had been trying to tell me in those final hospital days. This wasn't just about military service or secret missions. It was about using your gifts to help others, even when no one would ever know or thank you for it. Thunder had found his purpose again, and so had I. 3 months into my training with Thunder, Morrison received a phone call that changed everything. His face grew grave as he listened, occasionally glancing in my direction. "We have a problem," he said after hanging up. That was my former commanding officer. "There are people looking for Thunder, people who weren't supposed to know he still existed." My blood ran cold. "What kind of people?" "The kind your father spent his last years hiding from. During Thunder's final mission, he witnessed something he shouldn't have. Your father never told me the details, but he made it clear that certain individuals would do anything to ensure Thunder never fell into the wrong hands." Morrison began pacing, his military training evident in his tactical thinking. "Jim faked Thunder's death in official records, but somehow word has leaked that he's alive. We need to move him tonight." As if sensing the tension, Thunder appeared at the fence, his ears alert and eyes scanning for threats. His military training was kicking in. He knew danger when he felt it. "Where can we take him?" I asked, my mind racing. "There's a sanctuary in Montana, run by people I trust, but it's a 3-day drive, and we'll need to be careful about our route." That evening, as we prepared for the journey, I found myself questioning everything. Was I ready to give up my normal life for a horse I'd known for only 3 months? But as thunder nuzzled my shoulder, I realized the question wasn't whether I was ready. It was whether I could live with myself if I abandoned Dad's legacy now. Morrison handed me a pistol. "I hope we won't need this, but your father would never forgive me if I let anything happen to you or Thunder." The weight of the weapon in my hands made everything terrifyingly real. We left Morrison's ranch at 2 a.m., Thunder loaded in a nondescript trailer behind Morrison's pickup truck. I followed in my car, constantly checking mirrors for signs of pursuit. The plan was simple: take back roads through 3 states, avoiding major highways and stopping only for fuel and rest. By dawn, we'd covered nearly 200 miles without incident. Thunder had traveled calmly, trusting us completely despite the unusual circumstances. During our first rest stop at a remote truck stop, Morrison's phone rang. "They hit the ranch 4 hours after we left," he reported grimly. "Professional job, no damage, but they searched everything. We made the right call." As we continued north, Morrison shared more details about Dad's final mission. It was supposed to be routine reconnaissance in Afghanistan. Thunder was carrying communication equipment when they stumbled into something big: arms dealers working with corrupt military contractors. "Dad never said anything about Afghanistan," I said, though pieces of his mysterious behavior were finally making sense. He couldn't. The people involved had connections everywhere, including back home. Jim spent his last 2 years creating false trails and dead ends to protect Thunder, and by extension, your family. During our second night on the road, parked at a rest area in Wyoming, Thunder became agitated. His ears swiveled constantly and he paced nervously in the trailer. "Something's wrong," Morrison whispered, checking his sidearm. That's when we saw them. 2 black SUVs pulling into the rest area, their occupants scanning the parking lot systematically. Morrison started the engine quietly. "Hold on, son. Your father taught Thunder to handle rough rides." "Red." We pulled out slowly, trying not to attract attention, but one of the SUVs immediately began following us. The chase was about to begin, and I prayed Thunder's military training would be enough to keep us all alive. The pursuit lasted 40 terrifying minutes through winding mountain roads. Morrison drove with military precision while I followed, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Thunder remained remarkably calm in the trailer, as if high-speed chases were routine for him. When we finally lost our pursuers in a maze of logging roads, Morrison pulled over to check on Thunder. What we found amazed us both. The horse was completely relaxed, almost bored. This wasn't his first dangerous mission. "Your father trained him for exactly this scenario," Morrison realized. "Thunder's been in combat zones, under fire, carrying wounded soldiers through hostile territory. A car chase probably feels like a gentle training exercise to him." Beat. As we continued toward Montana, Morrison shared the full story of Thunder's military service. He wasn't just any rescue horse. He was part of an elite unit. Thunder and your father worked together in situations where helicopters couldn't fly and vehicles couldn't reach. They saved 43 lives over 2 years. "Why didn't Dad ever tell me he was a hero?" I asked, emotion thick in my voice. "Because Jim didn't see himself that way. He always said Thunder was the hero. He just held the reins." We reached the Montana sanctuary as the sun was setting on our 3rd day of travel. The facility was run by Sarah Chen, a former Army veterinarian who specialized in caring for retired military animals. "Jim called me 2 years ago," she explained as we unloaded Thunder. "He said someday his son would bring Thunder here, and I should be ready to help however I could." Thunder stepped off the trailer and immediately began exploring his new surroundings. Within minutes, he'd identified the safest spots, the best escape routes, and the locations of food and water. All military habits that would probably never fade. "He's home," Sarah said simply. "This is where warriors come to rest." Living at the sanctuary while helping Thunder adjust to his new home, I finally understood the man my father had been. Sarah shared stories from other military handlers who'd brought their animals here, tales of incredible bonds forged in impossible circumstances. "Your father was legendary among animal handlers," she told me one evening as we watched Thunder graze peacefully in the pasture. "He had an intuitive understanding of trauma and healing that saved not just human lives, but the animals who served alongside them." I'd been reading Dad's journal every night, learning about his philosophy of partnership with animals. One entry particularly struck me. "Thunder doesn't work for me, we work together. The moment you think you own a creature like this, you've lost everything that makes the relationship special." Thunder had been at the sanctuary for 2 weeks when something extraordinary happened. A new arrival, a severely traumatized military dog named Rex, had been refusing food and human contact since his handler's death in combat. Without any prompting, Thunder approached Rex's kennel and lay down outside it. For hours he maintained a calm, protective presence until the dog finally emerged. Within days, Rex was eating again and allowing human contact. "Thunder's doing what your father taught him," Sarah observed. "He's healing others by sharing his own strength." I realized then that my journey with Thunder wasn't ending. It was just beginning. Dad hadn't just left me a horse, he'd left me a calling. Morrison arrived for a visit and found me helping Sarah with the daily care of 12 retired military animals. "You've found your purpose," he said, watching me work alongside Thunder to comfort a newly arrived horse. "Dad knew this would happen, didn't he?" I asked. Morrison smiled. "Jim always said Thunder would teach you everything you needed to know about being a man. Looks like he was right." 6 months after that fateful auction, I made the decision that felt inevitable from the moment I'd first looked into Thunder's eyes. I sold my apartment, quit my corporate job, and moved permanently to Montana to work alongside Sarah at the sanctuary. Thunder had become more than just my father's legacy. He'd become my teacher, my partner, and my path to understanding what it truly meant to serve others. Together, we helped dozens of traumatized military animals find peace and purpose again. The threats from Dad's past had disappeared, apparently satisfied that Thunder was safely hidden away from public view. But we weren't hiding, we were healing, both the animals who came to us and the veterans who visited to reconnect with their former partners. On the anniversary of Dad's death, I sat in Thunder's pasture reading the final entry in his journal. "If something happens to me, I trust Thunder to guide my son toward the life he's meant to live. Some gifts can only be passed from father to son through the heart of a horse who understands both love and sacrifice." Thunder approached and pressed his forehead against mine, the same gesture he'd made that first night at Morrison's ranch. In that moment, I felt Dad's presence as clearly as if he were standing beside us. Morrison had been right. Thunder had taught me everything I needed to know about being a man. But more than that, he'd taught me about legacy, about the quiet heroism of caring for others, and about the unbreakable bonds that connect us across time and circumstance. As the sun set over the Montana mountains, Thunder and I walked together toward the barn where other wounded warriors waited for our help. Dad's mission was complete, but ours was just beginning. The circle was complete, but the story would continue with every life we touched, every animal we healed, and every veteran who found peace in Thunder's gentle presence.